Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be looking at the full moon in Libra on the 15th of April. And I'm also going to be looking at the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which is a really, really important astrological event. And it happens just a few days before Easter, before that full moon. But let's start generally with this full moon. Obviously, the sun is in Aries, the moon is in Libra. And with all full moons, we have that theme of closure and completion. We get to tie things up and put them to bed. And we also get to reach conclusions in the sense of making realizations. And in fact, the full moon and the new moon cycle always should be seen as a duo, because at the new moon we begin things and at the full moon we complete them. And of course, when we're looking at this theme of beginnings and endings, particularly for Libra, because this full moon is in Libra, we need to go back to the new moon in Libra on October the 8th last year to see that cycle in motion. So new beginnings, things that took off, things that happened, the endeavors you began, the relationships you began, well, they're going to have an important developmental stage will be reached around this full moon on the 15th of April, because either you've reached a certain stage and you either want to go further forward with it, or you want to think, you know what, I think it's completed itself. It's done its run. It doesn't have to be to do with a relationship, but it often is. And of course, full moons, as a rule, up the emotional ante. We're always a little bit more emotional at full moons. And of course, that means if we're in a relationship, if things are good, they're going to be great. We're going to be over the moon happy. And if things are really, really difficult, we're having a difficult time, and this is often a time when things really go pear-shaped because we're emotionally at sea. Remember, we are 90% water, and the idea of the full moon's effects on the tides, we could look at the full moon's effect on our emotional tides too. Now, this full moon is not a supermoon. The next one will be. In fact, the next full moon on May the 16th is a total lunar eclipse. So it's going to be absolutely spectacular to see. And one of the things I would say, talking of cycles again, is that the 15th of April, this full moon, does begin a 4-week period of major astrological events, major eclipses, conjunctions, all sorts of things going on. So we're in a very important period of the year, globally and individually. And you can think of this as being kicked off, really, by this full moon. This full moon does also have a name. It's called the pink moon. And I think that has something to do with a special flower that is to be seen in North America at this particular time. Don't ask me the name of it, but it's obviously pink. And this is also the Paschal full moon, which of course it relates to the idea that this full moon hovers over the Easter period. And in fact, as we go through this video today, then you're going to be really hearing a lot about the spiritual momentum at this particular time for a variety of reasons. And I think it's rather nice to think about this full moon and its Easter name, which is the Paschal full moon. So let's take a look at how this full moon looks in terms of the astrology, because then we can sort of see all the other things that are happening at that particular time. So if we look at this full moon, as you can see, I've set it for Cape Town, largely because I don't think I've ever set a full moon for South Africa, and I really, really wanted to do it with this one. And we can see very clearly the moon in the 10 o'clock position and the sun in the 5 o'clock position. And we can also see that the moon is sort of out on a limb, isn't it? It's all out there with everything else clustered in a sector of the chart. In fact, almost just a third of the chart. And this is a familiar pattern. A lot of the full moons that we've seen this year have tended to emphasize this close bundle shaping that we're in, and it makes for a certain intensity of experience. If things are going to be good, they're absolutely great, they're profoundly good. And if they're going to be bad, they're going to be really, really awful. And we get this kind of concentrated energy. And, we can use it for, doing things that demand a lot of focus, and also a short period of time even to complete something in. But we must also guard against being tunnel visioned, not seeing the full picture, and also not allowing time for other things to come into our lives. So that's just a really, really general pattern. But the things I want to look at, and you can probably see here as you look at the position of the sun, you can see just ahead of it, Mercury at 11 degrees of Taurus, Uranus at 13 degrees of Taurus, which means a Mercury-Uranus conjunction is on its way at the time of the full moon. In fact, it's going to be exact on the 18th of April, but it's in play around this time of the full moon. And with Mercury and Uranus, you get sudden kind of great ideas that come to you suddenly, breakthroughs, the idea of scientific understandings, and all sorts of things that we have in our personal lives where we've been really a bit up against it. Suddenly we have these great ideas that say, you know what, let's try it this way. And that turns out to be the breakthrough we were looking at. But of course, Mercury and Uranus are kind of an explosive couple. So there are explosions of one sort or another, whether we're looking nicely at fireworks and those kind of explosions, or whether we're looking at other things that are a little bit more disturbing, whether in the case of Mother Nature, or whether we're looking at those hotspots in the world, which are a raging conflict already. But then the potential for conflict to get a lot worse is often centered on some kind of Mercury-Uranus conjunction. So we get the good, the bad, and the ugly with this particular conjunction. But it is interesting that it is exactly on the 18th, because also on the 18th, the sun will be exactly square Pluto. So that's another of those occasions. I've been talking about intensity, I'm talking about profundity, things being extremely powerful. And of course, the full moon is applying to that square, to Pluto. So we've got a full moon backed by that Pluto effect, Pluto bringing about transformation, turning something that was one thing into another thing. With Pluto, we dig deep. Remember Pluto, the god of the underworld. We have to dig deep to find the treasure whenever Pluto is around, but also things that have been buried deep come to the surface. And of course, with Pluto and Uranus combined, we're also looking at things. I have talked about this from time to time, but frequently during the course of the war in Ukraine, there's been a lot of mention made of power stations, nuclear power stations, which have been the focus for missile attacks. And also, there are 4 major nuclear power plants in Ukraine. And so one would want to be very careful playing around with missiles or anything like that in a climate like this. But of course, we want to also remember that that word breakthrough that I use, that often with Pluto, this mighty kind of transformation occurs within a situation. And the best side of that would be a good transformation in terms of the conflict that is there at some point finding a conclusion in a good way and not in a bad way. But, you know, looking also at the Sun-Pluto conjunction, just Sun-Pluto square, you know, there've been the full moons during the course of the year, and it will continue until about June or July. Every full moon will be engaged with Pluto. So in a sense, all these full moons, you know, provide that opportunity for things to either become, you know, profoundly worse, if you like, or profoundly better. And if we think back to February, and we have that particular full moon, that was just prior to the invasion of Ukraine. And we know what happened subsequently and all the events that have been with us during that period since the invasion began. So we can see how full moons playing into Pluto can, in fact, bring about things that are really, in many ways, something that we find overwhelming, things that have been hidden, brought to the surface, things that have been lost are to be found. And each full moon seems to have some kind of, that's the theme, and it's going to be playing on that theme as we go further forward during the year as well. But what we also want to look at in this picture is the proximity of Jupiter to Neptune. And we're seeing those two in that sort of 5 o'clock position again. And this is one of the most important, well, certainly the most important astrological events of 2022. Now, the last time Jupiter and Neptune were together, they were in conjunction, was in 2009. And that time they were in the sign of Aquarius. So if we think back to 2009, and we have an idea of what was going on at that time, well, of course, we were only a couple of years out from the big financial subprime crash, and we were moving into ever deeper into the recession. And there is something about Jupiter-Neptune combos that does inflate a difficulty. And in that case, we did have all sorts of things happening in that year with the economy. We had the collapse of the Icelandic banking system. Michael Jackson died in those mysterious circumstances. We had swine flu, so here we are still with COVID. And also, most importantly, Russia cut off all gas supplies to Europe. So we've got quite a lot of echoes already in 2022, because although we're looking at the exact Jupiter-Neptune conjunction on the 12th of April, it is in fact very much with us. I'm going to be talking about that in a second right now, and has been for a little while. It's just getting closer and closer and closer. And as it separates, it will still be in orb for a greater part of the year. And another thing I want to bring back in terms of what happened in 2009, there was that extraordinary landing by the plane on the Hudson River, the plane captained by Captain Sully. So that was an extraordinary and miraculous event. And this is also in the kind of, you know, the province of Jupiter and Neptune are miracles, divine experiences, as well as some of those other things. You know, gas is very Jupiter, Neptune, so the cutting off of gas supplies, and the mysterious death of Michael Jackson. So there will be mysterious episodes during the course of 2022. And of course, the Icelandic banking system is probably going to chime with some other banking collapses and economic difficulties that we will all encounter as we go through 2022. And maybe particularly when we think about the proximity of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, when it's exact to that full moon squaring Pluto, backed by a Mercury-Uranus conjunction. I would say that this period of the year is stormy, chaotic, and all sorts of things have the potential to really be, very kind of change bringing, for want of a better word. The last time Jupiter and Neptune were in conjunction in the sign of Pisces was back in 1856. And of course, none of us remember that time, but I'm going to remind you of a couple of events that were really significant in 1856. There was the patenting of the tin type camera. Now, Neptune has a lot to do with film and photography. In fact, Neptune was discovered in 1846. And of course, that was the time of the great spiritualist movement, if you like, beginning. We also had the development of film photography and many things that are also related to Neptune. And it's interesting, in 1856, this patenting of this tin type camera came about. There was also the Treaty of Paris. Now, you probably don't immediately recall what that was about, but it ended the Crimea War. Now, that war was between the Empire of Russia and the Ottoman Empire, but it brought in France and Great Britain as well. So the signing of that treaty, the Paris Treaty, brought an end to the Crimea War. And that's also another ting when we think about what's going on in 2022, is that we have, of course, Crimea already annexed by Russia, but of course, Russia is still, as I speak, in Ukraine, trying to make land grabs further into Ukraine. So that's another chime with 1856. Now, there were a lot of mysteries on sea or related to the sea during 1856. The steamer Pacific left Liverpool and was just never seen again. And another cargo ship, working from memory, I think it's the John Rutledge it was called, well, that also hit an iceberg and sank. And so there were a lot of things related to the sea, to mysterious events that also characterize that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Well, I'm going to move away from the horoscope for a moment and talk a little bit more about why this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is really a very important event. Now, in fact, Pisces is the most compassionate sign of the zodiac. We think about Pisces and healing and helping and divinity, the ability to, really touch very high levels of consciousness and compassion. That's the nature of Pisces. It's a very artistic, creative, mystical sign. And the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, and the fact that Jupiter is the old ruler of Pisces and Neptune the modern ruler of Pisces, we get this extraordinary sense that this is going to be a year of extraordinary developments in terms of in terms of compassion. And I want to relate to that right now because we're in that period already. And we already have an example of what's been going on in response, the world's response to Ukraine's plight. People have come on board, they've opened up their homes, they've sent money, they've gone to Ukraine, they've gone to Poland. People have done everything they possibly can to help this country. And that's the kind of thing you'd expect from a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. It is the essence of humanitarianism. It's where we find our humanity. So it is rather special. And, in other ways, when we look at this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, we could be thinking of more evidence about things we can't see, the world beyond, Does that mean more powerful telescopes that tell us more about what we can't see? Does it mean that we understand more about reality and the many, many realities that there may be? Jupiter opening the gate to other worlds. That is one aspect that we must look for and expect with a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. We can also look at great developments related to the sea world, whether these are great discoveries about marine life or whether we can find sea creatures or sea plants that contain very important cures for us. There is something about drugs to do with Neptune as well. And while we may want to look out for the development of recreational drugs, which may cause incredible problems, Jupiter inflating Neptune's ability there. But we could also look at wonderful, wonderful breakthroughs in terms of cures and conditions that are to be found on this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction or around it. Remember, we've got almost a year to think of these things, not just April the 13th, right? April the 12th, 13th. But I also want to look at the negative side of a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, because there's never only one note, one tone with something in astrology. It has many characters, many expressions. And so the negative side of Jupiter-Neptune is chaos, is confusion. It's really losing the plot on a massive scale, loss and sacrifice on a massive scale. We can look at the disinformation, fake news. We've seen a lot of that this year. We've had statements being made by people which beg our belief because we know what's really going on, and we have someone telling us, no, it isn't. And so that is the negative side of that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So disinformation is rife, and that we can all be led up the garden path by people, organizations, the fake news, and that's something to be very, very aware of. If we also think about Jupiter and Neptune too, it's often with Neptune, we take the path of least resistance. And I've already mentioned the idea of addictions and drugs and escapism. Then, to a certain extent, we need some escapism in our life. We need to go to the movies. We need to have experiences that are out of this world. And there's a lot of virtual technology around that will literally do that, transport us out of our reality. And that can be an exciting and inspiring thing. But we don't want to escape into the realm where we are no longer in control of our lives, or really, countries are no longer in control of their own destinies. So these are things to watch out for when we're looking at this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction and its many manifestations. Now, I think I'm going to move on to the full moon itself now. After all, that's the focus for this video. And I'm going to go through it sign by sign, but just generally to repeat myself that I think this full moon coming at a time, just before, 2 weeks later, there's going to be a solar eclipse. 2 weeks after that, a lunar eclipse, a total lunar eclipse. We've got Mercury-Uranus, Sun-Uranus conjunctions, Sun-Pluto squares. We've got so much going on. Now, this is a really profound period of the year, and a lot is going to change. A lot is going to happen. Some of it we're not going to like a lot, but there's always room for those things that amount to a reason to celebrate. So let's go through full moon sign by sign. I'm going to start with Libra. This is your full moon, the only full moon this year in your sign. And it relates to or has a connection with that new moon of October the 8th. And that might sort of fill in a few blanks, connect a few dots for you. But technically, when we have a full moon in our sign, then we're looking at a time when we're quite empowered, because of course you are a Libra and the full moon is in Libra. So that idea of harnessing the emotional aspect of the full moon to the conscious and physical aspects of our existence, it becomes a time of great empowerment. So the decisions you make, and I know how difficult it is for Libra to make decisions, and that's not because you don't know what you want or you don't know what to do, it's because you don't want to do something that's going to upset everyone else or perhaps get in the way of a better thing further along the line. So you're kind of paralyzed by indecision because you want to do the right thing. But really and truly, full moon squaring Pluto, you just have to do it. This is a time, yes, of empowerment, but also of recognizing what is no longer of purpose in your life. You know, what can you do without? What do you need to cut back, trim, eliminate in order for greater growth? And there is a sense that a relationship could fall into this brief, because the sun, of course, is in the area of relationships. So this could be a time when you want to make the ties that bind. And it's Easter. Maybe you have decided to get married or get engaged or do something relative to your relationship life at this time. And that's a profound statement of the full moon at this very profound astrological time. But it can also be the recognition that this is over. The party is over. There is no further to go with this relationship, and it is time to, to part in goodwill, hopefully, and to move on. And the same thing can apply not just to a romantic relationship, but it can also apply to your connection with a company, your contract, and it can also apply to other kinds of friendships and associations. And remember, the full moon cycle is going to go on until we reach the solar eclipse on the 30th of April. So there's a full 2 weeks for the indications that I'm giving you to manifest. So if we come to Aries, the sun is in your sign and the moon is in your 7th house. So we still have many of those same themes about completing a relationship by marriage or engagement or signing contracts or any of those things that say, I'm committed to this project, I'm committed to you, I'm committed to this organization. And the sun in your own sign, of course, is shining big and bright, but there's a caveat, because you can't always do what you want or go forward in the way you would want to go without considering other people, especially partners or people who are also involved in a project, an endeavor, an event, a relationship. And the moon is saying it's time to listen to other people. It's time to bring other people's feelings and instincts and ideas into your life, so that it's not just you and you alone, but you together with others, you as a team. So there can be great blessings at this time, and the idea that you're not alone, that you are involved with others, you are part of a team, can be the realization and the developments of this full moon in Libra. But also when you think back to the new moon in Libra, maybe indeed a new relationship began in October, and you've now come 6 months on. You've already passed a very particularly important point 3 months ago, and we're looking at the January period, that January full moon. And of course, that was, engaging with Pluto as well. So that 3-month period may have given a relationship either a feeling that this was the wrong relationship for you, or maybe you felt it, but you didn't do anything about it. So now, 3 months on from January, and the writing is on the wall. So it is time to, say goodbye. But there is definitely that 6-month cycle, 3-month cycle playing into events around the Easter time and beyond to the end of April. If we look at Capricorn, then this full moon, the moon itself, is in the 10th house. So we're in the area of career, life direction, life goals, your place in the world. So this is completing a cycle. So it means you may have finished a job, or you may have finished a part of a job. You may still be in the same job, but there's an aspect of it that's done and dusted. You'll be closing it up, done and dusted. But for some Capricorns, this is a symbol of retirement. Your place in the world, the role you play is now complete, and retirement lies ahead. Or it could be the fact that a job comes to an end, and so that particular job marks the end of work, although there will be new positions in the future. And I think this full moon is important for really getting the balance right between your life out in the world and your private life. There is a balance to be struck here. One can't be stronger than the other because that's imbalance. So getting things in balance is important. And a lot of the events around this time might be related to that you might come down to it and think, you know what, I've not got this balance right. I have not been paying attention maybe to my family, to my home, and I need to get this right. There's just been too much going on in my life, and I need to get that balance back. Now, the reverse is the case when we come to Cancer. Of course, Cancer is the sign of home and family. You are the great nurturer of the zodiac team. So the moon actually being in the 4th house of the horoscope, the place of home and family, is significant. We still have that same theme of closure and completion, but with a slightly greater focus on homes and family. So it may be that you're closing a chapter on the family front. That can be for many reasons. Maybe a member of the family is getting married and therefore leaving the family in a way. Of course, you're gaining a new member of the family, but there is that idea of a chapter being over. And there are many other ways that can mark the end of a chapter in terms of family members leaving, perhaps some going off to university or to school, or marking a change in family life. But you can also do it physically. So we're looking at the end of a chapter in your home life, so that you're looking towards moving somewhere new. But of course, we can close off a chapter of our home life in different ways too. We can, we can change our home. And so it looks different from the way it looked in the past, so that we're bringing the idea of a chapter to an end, but in a way that we're still in the same home, but we're marking the end of how it used to look or what we used to do in it. So if you've been working from home, for instance, it may be time to get back into the workforce out there. Also, I think this is about the past. The past is important. It's a reference always to look at in terms of our guide to the decisions we make and the future we will go towards. But there is such a thing as being too tied to the past. And this full moon may have a very strong message that says, you can't live in the past anymore. You have to make a break with the past and move on. So let's come to our next group, and we'll start with Pisces. Pisces, of course, is the sign before Aries, so that we have here Aries is in the 2nd house of your solar chart, and what's happening in the 8th house is this full moon. So the full moon is bringing its full beams to bear on things to do with your sense of self and the sense really of the wealth that you have in life. But it's not just the money you make. It's not just the wealth you acquire and the possessions you acquire. It's about other people's. So we're looking at how you share financial responsibility with people, how other people's, how you work financially with other people. It can be your relationship with banks and lending institutions and credit card companies. That is a financial relationship. And you can have a financial relationship with your other because you share the financial responsibility of your lives. So we're looking here at the completion of something. Does that mean you've completed a contract, so it's over? Does that mean maybe you've been working your way through a divorce or a separation or leaving a company? So we're looking at redundancy settlements. Is that what we're looking at with this full moon? Or are we looking at the end of a long-term financial commitment? Maybe the end of a mortgage, maybe the end of a payment scheme. And so that is a really positive idea linked to the full moon in the 8th house. You've completed that commitment. But it can also bring things to a head. So if you've got a financial problem, you've got a financial issue with people, there are issues over settlements, inheritances, all those kind of things, they're going to be at maximum volume around the time of this full moon. There is always the sense that you will close and complete satisfactorily in the wake of this full moon and in the 2 weeks following it. But there's also the equal possibility that things are at a crisis point and there's got to be a lot of change and giving way in order to get things back in balance. Now, the opposite side, and we're looking at Virgo here, we've got the same theme, same meat, different gravy. But of course, this is about your earnings, your possessions, the things that you have on your own terms. And it is your self-worth. So the impact other people have on your sense of self-worth is going to be very important here. If our sense of self-worth is strong, it doesn't matter whether somebody likes us or pays us enough in terms of that's not reflecting well on our value. We just think, right, you don't like me, you don't want me, you don't see what I have is full of value. Well, that's it then. I'm moving on. I'm slinging my hook. But if our self-esteem and our self-value is wobbly, then other people's treatment of us can be a real problem because we feel the lack of being seen as someone of value. We're not getting enough money. We're being treated badly financially. We haven't got enough, and other people aren't doing enough to really support us and to back our sense of self-esteem. So these are the issues in the arena at this time of this full moon. And I mean, yes, we can't just judge ourselves on our own. I mean, we do have to have a sense of our self-worth, what we know we do and what we know we're worth. Of course we do. But it is also important that it's seen to be what we think it is. And this full moon is addressing that very issue. So it is a crisis point in a sense for, are you still in this relationship or in this financial relationship? Are you prepared to take less than you deserve? And if the answer is a big flat no, then you need to vote with your feet. So coming on to the next mutable sign, we're looking at Gemini. So the full moon is in your fellow air sign of Libra. So it's at a very, very nice angle to your sun sign. This is the most creative area of the horoscope, the 5th house. And when we think of a full moon here and the sense of completion, this is often the end of a gestation period. And we think about creativity. We can be creative in an artistic way. We can be creative in an entrepreneurial way. We can be creative in the kitchen. We can be in a million ways creative, but we can also be procreative. And that means babies are in view. Whether a baby is about to be born, or whether you're about to become a grandparent or a godparent, or your best friend is about to have a baby, or suddenly there are all sorts of babies and living little people in your life. And what it's doing is giving you a sense of completion, which is good. But we also can see all sorts of crises involving things to do with the creative aspects of life. I mean, that's why we have a full moon. Things come to a tipping point. So on the one hand, maybe a project that you've been working on, maybe it is ready for the off, it's done, but there are all sorts of problems with it, and therefore it's brought things to a head. And you'll certainly know whether a project has got legs at this particular time. I think too, the fifth house is about our inner child. And it is so important for us to think or address our inner child. That's why we have play. That's why we do sport. That's why we do things that bring us that sense of joy and inhibition. So the full moon will show you where you're not getting enough joy. And it's so important. Yes, we've got to put a roof over our heads. We've got to work for a living. We've got to do the right thing. There are all sorts of reasons why we're getting short shrift in terms of our joy factor. But, you know, make time for it. Make time for joy. This is so important. Make time for your inner child. Hear your inner child, because it has a lot to tell you. If we come to the opposite sign and we look at Sagittarius, the moon itself is in the 11th house. So we're right in that humanitarian area. So it is where we get together with people, that 11th house. It's our group consciousness. So the full moon is saying, you know, not wake up and smell the coffee so much as, what is this about? How the ability to join up with groups and with people for humanitarian causes gives us a sense of completion. We feel complete because we are involving ourselves with projects and people that have a greater service to offer. So it is the humanitarian area of the horoscope. It's also the entrepreneurial area of the horoscope. So it could mean that an entrepreneurial project is complete, it's ready for the off, all the dots have been connected and the boxes ticked and you're ready, you're done, it's ready to roll. On the other hand, it may be that an entrepreneurial venture is done. It's gone as far as it can go, and you have to say, it's enough, that's it, it's over, we're parking it. But the 11th house is also an extension of the 10th house, which is where our role in life is, our career, if you like, and where in the 10th house we might be looking at career per se and what we want to achieve. In the 11th house, it's all about, what's the point? What's the point of all this? If I'm not happy, if I'm not fulfilled, if it's not giving me anything. So for a few Sagittarians, this is really all about deciding that maybe the job you do is not fulfilling you, and there isn't this sense it's of purpose. So some Sagittarians are going to be ending a job at this point, and maybe ending one or more activities where you do feel that sense of what's the point. Final group, we're in our fixed group. So we're looking at Taurus, and Taurus, we're in the 6th house. And I think that is the house where we do the work of life. So it has a lot to do with our routines. It has a lot to do with our well-being, has a lot to do with our health. It has a lot to do with all sorts of systems. So this full moon tends to, well, it does many things, but it can expose weaknesses. So if we think about health, it's going to expose where we have a health weakness, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it would be good to do something about it. Certainly a full moon exacerbates problems as much as it does to knock them on the head. So this idea of this full moon exposing weaknesses in your life, things that are getting in the way of the work of life, those need to be addressed. Now, it might also show that it's the end of course of treatment. It's the end of some kind of course per se. But also this area of the chart is about our purpose in life. And often that purpose could and should be, what do we do to help others? What is the things that we are doing that have a knock-on effect of pleasing other people, of being useful for other people, all those kind of things. And that full moon may highlight our need to do more, or our realization that we've done too much. And I'm going to allow you to really address your own situation here, because that's the kind of pattern, but each of you Taurians will have a different way of addressing that very thing. Have we done not enough for others? Have we done too much? And that full moon is a great time of assessment, and linked to Pluto, it says it's time to eliminate the negative so that the positive can come through. If we look at Scorpio, of course, this full moon for you is in the 12th house. And this is an area of the subconscious, the superconscious. In the 12th house, we seek to transcend reality. And that really chimes with everything I was saying about that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. It's where we seek to go beyond. And in a way, this full moon is offering you that experience, whether you have powerful dreams, whether you have powerful intuitions, whether you have a sense of, you know what, I realize why I'm here. Because of course, the 12th house is opposite to the 6th house, where we find our life purpose. We do the work of life. Then the 12th house is uniquely tied up in that process. But this is our inspiration. This is our otherworldly connection, where we feel we've had some divine intervention, or we've had some kind of experience or understanding of the way things really are and what we should be doing. But of course, a little bit like your opposite sign, Taurus, sometimes a full moon on this axis will reveal weaknesses in your system, the weaknesses in health. So I think it's always a good plan. And unfortunately, of course, this full moon falls around Easter time, and it may be a time you're with friends and relatives and lots of events are going on and you want to enjoy them fully. But yet this full moon is saying, you know what? Don't push it. Don't push your health. So at least take in some early nights. And if during the course of the weeks that follow, the 2 weeks up to that not total solar eclipse, then you need to watch out for health problems and for signs that certain things, maybe old injuries, dental problems, all that kind of stuff, really does need to be attended to. Last two signs, and we're looking at Leo. Leo, for you, this full moon is in the 3rd house. And the 3rd house is all about information. So this full moon may, in fact, allow you to complete a process in the sense you've got everything you need now. All the information is in. Now, it may have something to do with bureaucracy, in the sense that you've got a lot of forms to fill in, a lot of things that need to be together in order to get something done and red taped. And this full moon allows that. On the other hand, you may realize at the time of the full moon that you are missing information that is vital to a process that you are going through. So the full moon both completes a process, but also sheds light on what isn't complete, if you like. Now, information coming to you could be quite profound. Remember, we've got Pluto playing into this full moon. So the information reaching you, whether you're talking to somebody, it's texts or it's emails or however it may be coming to you, could really mean that you're having to look at something with a totally different pair of eyes. And it may involve you leaving something, something coming to an end, or something radically being reformed. This also is a time when results are in. And that might have a literal translation. Maybe you've taken exams, or maybe you've come to the end of a course and the results are in. Is it success beyond belief, or is there room for improvement? But one way or another, we're looking at all the sorts of things that come in the realm of ideas and thinking and knowledge and understanding and information, and even travel as well. And I might say that this full moon might be a little stressful in terms of travel. So if you're planning to travel around Easter, make sure you've got backup plans and all sorts of alternatives, and you're prepared for delays and diversions. It's just good practice. You may not need them, but at least you've got the comfort of knowing you have all sorts of plan Bs and alternatives that you can go to. And particularly on Saturday, then that travel, Saturday, Sunday, really, travel is going to be a mite more stressful than it might otherwise have been. Now, that same message about travel also applies to you, Aquarius, because you're also on the axis of travel and communication. And I think it applies particularly to long haul travel. So if you're going quite a distance around the Easter period, but especially on Saturday and Sunday, then remember, there could be all sorts of irritations linked to travel. It doesn't mean you won't get there, but it might mean you get there late, or you've got a story to tell. But also this full moon also, I think, highlights things about your future plans. And it's not just, let's say, you know, what I'm doing next week or next year, a little bit longer down the line. It has a lot to do with how you see your life evolving, and the points and the ambitions in a way that you want to get there. If you, for instance, think, you know, when I'm 50, you know, I want to be job free. I want to be living in the Bahamas. You know, I want to be writing books. You know, that's your 9th house plan. And so this full moon has something to do with that. It either gets you a lot nearer to that end, or it shows you, you're on the wrong trajectory completely. So we do look at our life further down the line. It's about time and distance in both those ways. And also it is for you about the exchange of information too, but on a bigger scale. It may be conversations and discussions with people who live quite far away, and they have a really big impact on your life, whether, you know, something that happens in the course of that exchange that makes you feel complete in a good way, or it amounts to, that's as far as you go. That's where that conversation, that exchange, that information gathering and receiving process has led to. So that's taken me all the way through the 12 signs of the zodiac. And it's interesting because I'm concluding this video, and a lot of the things that have been mentioned already are going to be in my conclusion, really, because this is a time we're looking at the great and huge response to the suffering in Ukraine by the rest of the world. That is such a great example of a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, but of course there are many others as well. And I was thinking this week, but largely because of a session I was having with a new client who was really distraught because a relationship had come to an end, and she thought she had found her soulmate. And so the idea that her soulmate was gone from her life was too much to bear. And it brings to mind the misunderstandings we have about soulmates. Yes, we can meet our soulmate, but we can meet our soulmate for half an hour, but we know it. We recognize something in that exchange. That's our soulmate. It lasts half an hour. But the contact is what was necessary. That's all it is and was for this lifetime. That connection is it. Doesn't matter how long we're with our soulmate, it is the connection that matters. And sometimes we're very fortunate, we do get to meet and fall in love with our soulmate. And that relationship lasts a lifetime. But eventually for one of us, even in a lifetime, one of us is going to lead the other. So there is that sense at some point you will lose your soulmate. But that doesn't mean the experience is invalid, that your soulmate isn't valid, that isn't your soulmate. And it also doesn't mean because you feel you found your soulmate that you will live happily ever after. In fact, you may live unhappily ever after, because a soulmate isn't always that sense of perfection in that everything about the relationship is perfect. Sometimes our soulmates are there to remind us we have work to do on ourselves. We have work to do in this lifetime. And it is our connection with our soulmate that is facilitating that. But above and beyond the idea of meeting our soulmate and finding that wonderful connection, there's also those soul-to-soul moments we have with other people, even in a supermarket queue, waiting at the checkout. We have some time to talk to the person behind us or in front of us. And suddenly there is that sense of responding to that person, soul to soul, and how amazing that is. Occasionally, I have that experience when I'm working with someone and I know where I'm connected to. And it is a profound thing for both of us. It brings us both to tears because we have touched something so deep in our soul. And that is very healing and very enlightening. So in a way, looking at this idea of soul, there is so much more to it than I think perhaps we bandy about a bit. We do take the idea of a soulmate for granted. I mean, there are so many levels of what happens soul on soul. And I think this really is the essence of this video. Thank you for watching. Take care. And I look forward to next time. Bye for now.